Many of the largest oil-producing countries in the world are part of a cartel known as the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, that is OPEC. And in 2016, OPEC and allies with top non-oil exporting countries to form an even more powerful entity named OPEC Plus. The cartel's goal is to exert control over the price of the precious fossil fuel known as crude oil, and controls over 50% of the global oil supplies and about 90% of proven oil reserves, in a bid to help ease the pressure on the oil and gas prices and inflation as economies around the world recover after pandemic lockdowns. OPEC has agreed to increase global oil production by 400,000 barrels per day. The agreement will lead to an unleashing of millions of barrels of bottled up crude over the next 2 years, as the group commits to restoring all cuts they made at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The group also agreed to the new production allocation from May 2022 after Saudi Arabia and others agreed to United Arab Emirates' request that threatened the plan. It will interest you to know that the deal marks a turning point for the oil industry, which went to a tailspin in the early months of the pandemic as economies around the world went into hibernation. And oil demand sank, leaving oil markets chaotic as the United States benchmark crude briefly fell below zero. I'm being joined by the Chief Executive Officer, Energy Insights. Energy Insights is a research company that focuses on the energy sector, through Mr. Osato Gobadia. Thank you very much, Mr. Gobadia. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's great to be with you.
Yes, first, how would you react to this final decision after days of UAE and Saudi Arabia, a lot of ups and downs, but finally there's been an increase of 400,000 that will go on till next year. Take us through what this means to you and where do you see Nigeria in all of this?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So yes, as we know, last year when the pandemic hit, demand for crude oil fell. And so OPEC Plus, price fell as well. So to regulate that, OPEC Plus had to come in and introduce production cuts of about 10 million barrels per day. So gradually, they've been reducing those cuts, and now there's still about 5.8 million barrels per day that's left to be removed. So that's what this agreement sets in motion to start doing. So over the course of this year, we're going to have 400,000 barrels per day brought back into production. And it's an extra 400,000 barrels per day each month till December of 2021. I think from a Nigerian perspective, it's definitely a good thing. The NNPC have been quite vocal about the impacts that their curtailed oil production has had. Right, they've been complaining that they've not been able to remit as they would like to the federation. So hopefully as Nigeria's production starts to increase, we should see more revenues for NNPC and by proxy for the federation as well. More than that, it also helps our foreign exchange situation, right? Because a lot of our foreign exchange comes from still crude oil and gas. So this is definitely good. Generally, it's good for Nigerian oil production. Like your previous guest was talking about Nigeria at the stage where the world's at the stage where we're moving away from oil and gas. So there's really no time for the countries like us, really have to get on board and make sure we're utilizing our oil assets before they become less relevant to the world.
Well, that's a very good way to start this discussion. Now, following this up, do we now see any more price issues? I'm talking about price wars. And where do you see shale oil in all of this? Because experts like you say when the price of crude is on the high side, it's always a good deal to start producing shale.
Exactly. Due to the high cost of shale oil, when the price gets too high, it becomes less advantageous for countries like us that produce less costly forms of crude oil. So in terms of what's happening with the pricing, over the past week we've seen the prices start to drop. Obviously, that's been aided by the OPEC Plus decision. Prices are currently dropped from $70 and should stabilize shortly. And when that stabilizes, it could mean overall, even though prices are reducing, Nigeria's production should increase. So net we should see an increase, hopefully, in our oil revenues as a result. But the situation seems to be stable. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have agreed. Things look on the pricing front, things look more stable than definitely they were last year.
Talking about, many say demand has actually rebounded, looking at the vaccinations and all that is happening across board. But the Delta variant is also something that everyone is talking about. So what do you think? Are we going to continue at this pace, or there will be, we could creep back one way or the other with all of these challenges that still stand along? Because if the third variant continues this way and the figures continue to rise in the United States and the UK, then there might be problem for the oil market.
Yes, definitely. That's the problem. The problem with the Delta variant is that it's pretty bad in the countries that consume the most oil, right? So you look at you mentioned the US, India as well. It's having a rough time there, and these are the major producers of oil. So it's a real risk that I think people in the industry are looking at. But that being said, we've been doing this for a while now. People are getting vaccinated. We've made some progress with vaccination. So regardless of what happens when the risk crystallizes, all things being equal, we should be better. We should be in a better position than we were for the second and the first waves, just because of one, we have the experiences dealing with COVID, and two, like I mentioned, we're further ahead in vaccines. So it's definitely a real risk. What's going on with the Delta variant and the third wave? Something that we're keeping our eyes on. But we should be able to do better with this just because of our experience and the vaccination progress.
So how long, as an expert, let me ask you this way, how long do you think OPEC and OPEC Plus will continue to have all of these arguments? When you look at the countries, the OPEC member countries, you see the OPEC Plus member countries, and you look at this tally both countries. How long do you think we'll continue to have all of this brouhaha before we now settle down for an increase or a reduction in supply and all of that? I think they will both remain relevant as long as we continue to depend on crude.
Yes, definitely. And and remember, like OPEC Plus was a response to shale oil as well. So as long as that's there, we still need that OPEC Plus will still be relevant, right? But in terms of the current agreement that they have now, that's simply a function of COVID, right? So for as long as COVID is still introducing a lot of uncertainty, for as long as there's still variants going there's still variants coming and increasing the number of cases every now and then, OPEC and OPEC Plus will still have to be keeping an eye on the market and introducing production cuts and easing them as necessary. Because it's not an easy balance. Countries like Nigeria and, like I mentioned earlier, UAE, these are countries that desperately would like to have higher production. But obviously, higher production also comes at the risk of much lower oil prices, much lower than we would like them to be anyway. So it's a delicate balancing act for OPEC Plus, and they should continue to be relevant. They've mentioned that the cuts should end by September of next year, but obviously all that depends on what we see with COVID going on. So hopefully, COVID situation, people get vaccinated and the vaccines are able to deal with the variants, and we can get some certainty back in the markets.
Can we also talk about the state of our refineries, in the context of the call for higher production? How does that favor us too?
Yeah, so as you know, our refineries are currently not working. They're currently not operational. They are the major ones, the four major ones are being undergoing rehabilitation. There are different stages of the rehabilitation process. The Dangote refinery has not yet started production. So right now we are still getting 100% of our fuel from foreign refiners, right? So where the refinery comes into this discussion is in a particular situation where they're up and running, and then they can start to capture some of the value from that process. But right now we're still importing all our petrol from foreign refiners, and obviously still paying subsidies on the petrol as well.
Mr. Sato, let's talk through gas development. We've seen government focusing on gas, and according to the minister, Timi Silva, he said it's a decade of gas, and we see a lot of efforts aimed at activating this sector, to just help address some of the challenges we faced with regards to crude oil. DPR also came out lately to tell us that our proven reserves, I think, is even on the high side. But why are we not really taking advantage of this? Or how soon do you see us beginning to get the benefits of gas development or gas production in Nigeria? NLNG is a very good example.
Sorry, I think I missed the last part of your question. But
yes, I said, when are we likely to start getting the benefits of this large reserve of gas? Because everybody keeps talking about the NLNG example.
Right. So let me start from this. Why are we so far behind on gas? And Energy Insights actually put out a video 2 weeks ago, I think, explaining this to our audience. And essentially, what happened with gas is that over the years we've focused on crude oil, right? Not just us, but the international oil companies that have come here and they've come here in search of crude oil. So we've been developing crude oil to the detriment of gas. So today we look at it, our gas infrastructure, regulations, and even the entrepreneurship landscape, they're still relatively immature. So that's where we are with gas today. Now, in terms of how long it will take, it has to be quick, right? Because like everyone's talking about, there's an energy transition going on. Countries are banning the use of fossil fuels. Global international banks are limiting the amounts they are lending to companies who want to develop oil and gas assets, right? So there's clearly an energy transition going on, and so we have to be quick. We have to get it right this time around. There's no room for lapses. Just because we don't want a situation where we finally become mature when oil and gas is no longer as relevant to the world. The news last week, news broke about the AKK pipeline, suffering from some challenges. Hopefully that gets sorted out quickly because, like I said, we have to get it right this time. We can't afford to, have the same problems of delayed infrastructure projects because by the time they are done, we might have a situation where the gas is not as relevant. But right now, we have hundreds of billions of dollars on as well, and onshore and offshore in Nigeria. So we have to be quick to actually get the value from these resources we have.
Now, wrapping up this discussion, I'd like to take you through this, when we talk about the energy sector, something that has been topical for some time. More money for government as we sell crude above around $70. Very good. Our budget is predicated about $40 or something, so we're making more money. But at the same time, we'll pay more for PMS at the pump because we don't refine. That's another discussion, another kettle of fish. Now the issue of subsidy comes in, and deregulation, everyone says, is the answer. What is your position? Because making more money, fine, but we're also going to pay more for PMS if we fully deregulate the sector. What's your position in all of these arguments?
And that's very true. And the problem is a political one, right? Because now the price of diesel is about $2.90 the last time I checked, and there's nowhere in the world where diesel sells for higher than petrol. Petrol normally sells higher, so that gives you a sense of how much we would have to pay at the pump with all this regulation. And clearly, the government is not willing to put Nigerians through that at this time. So that's why we're still paying a lot in subsidies. There are concerns about how sustainable it is. NNPC is struggling to remit to the country because of this heavy subsidy payments that we're making. So it's a delicate balancing act. There's strong arguments on both sides because of the situation of the country now. You don't want to increase the petrol price just like that. But at the same time, there's limited money for the government to fund expenses like paying salaries, taking care of projects and so on, because we're paying subsidies. So it's a delicate balancing act that we have to get right. There's no easy answers, unfortunately.
Well, I think it's a good way to leave it for today. Thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us on our show. Really appreciate this, Mr. Osato Gobadia. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Energy Insights. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.